Hello, welcome to my art studio. This is Annie Goldberg, and today I'm going to be talking about setting up your studio and your space for doing some basic watercolors. I'm going to go over the supplies and materials that you need. I'm going to talk about some very beginner level stuff that are wonderful for any level, and then I'll also talk about some extra kind of fancier stuff. So I'll make sure to discuss all the supplies from a very low budget level to some fancier stuff if you want to spoil yourself a little bit. But at the very beginning, all the materials that I'll showcase can be used in any of my watercolor projects. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's start with paper or paint surfaces. Now I have here 3 different levels of materials that you can buy. I'll start with the most basic. Now this is called mixed media paper, and if you're only going to have one paper in your art studio and you want to be able to do multiple mediums, this is a really good choice. It's a 98-pound weight, and it's suitable for all wet media. That means watercolor, acrylic, marker, pen and ink, brush markers, as well as drawing or sketching. It's a nice paper for that too. The benefit is that it's in this nice book, and if you want to kind of make a little paint book or a little record of your work, you get this when you're done, you can work through and you get this nice little bound up little book. And when you're ready to upgrade, or you only want to do watercolor, you'll start to see around, this is the same brand of paper, but it's watercolor paper. Now this is 140 pound and it's cold press, so that means that it's going to have a little bit more texture to it. You can see it's nice and thick. The difference between mixed media and watercolor is this is going to be able to hold a lot more water, more wet paint, and have more feathering, more flow in your paint. You can choose to buy it like this, where it's glued like a tablet, or they do have spiral bound as well if you want to keep it all together in a little book. I prefer this because as I paint, I like to tear it out and tape it or stretch it, so that that helps it control the amount of wavy or bubbling that it might get. If you use a lot of water, you'll still see a little bit of that with this paper, but as it dries, it'll settle down. And then once you're ready, and it doesn't have to be this Canson brand, there's other brands that it'll say watercolor, and you'll see it at most general supply stores, Target, Walmart, a couple different brands. But if this is watercolor, it's going to be a higher weight and ready to handle more water. Once you've worked your way up through and you're starting to get to know yourself as an artist, the Arches watercolor block is a nice investment to make. I use this for really finished pieces that I've worked through. If I'm doing any sketches or exercises or messing around, I definitely use one of these 2 papers. But once you're ready and you want to do a really nice finished piece, and you want to invest in a watercolor block, this is it. You can see that it looks a little bit different. It doesn't flip through like pages. All the sides of the tablet are sealed with glue, and that's where it gets the watercolor block. And the way you work with this is it lays flat, and you can work with it just as is. You don't need to tape the edges. It's all sealed. It won't bleed through to the pages underneath. It's really thick and nice paper. It's got beautiful feathering to it as the watercolors are drying. It can handle a lot of water, and it does not bleed through. And then when you're done with it, with your piece and it's all dry, the way that you get the paper out is you take a clean palette knife, very clean, and gently stick it in the key here and then pull it along all 4 edges to release the paper. I've got 2 sizes of that, and again, this is special. I only myself worked up to this recently because it is an investment. There's a big price difference between the Arches watercolor block and the first 2 options I showed you. So I have the 8x10, and then I also have the 9x12, It is really nice stuff. It's delightful to work with, and it's nice you can keep some stuff in there. Keeps it nice and flat, but you can see this is how the pages look once you cut them out with your palette knife. So those are the 3 paper options. There's also watercolor boards and other surfaces like that you might see around. But if you're just getting started, you know, go ahead and I would either get a mixed media book or some watercolor paper of any brand and get started, you know, messing with your brushes and trying out some exercises. My personal recommendation if you're just starting out would be to get some watercolors that look more like this. These you'll see are called semi-moist watercolors. The brand on this is Prang, and these are my personal favorite that I recommend to all my students, whether they're a young person, as young as 6, or even up to adult. And all the projects that I create myself, I use these. I use some other materials as well, but by far the main one I use is these Prang. And the difference between the semi-moist and this kind that you'll see is when you open them and they're new and you touch them, you'll feel that they're a little sticky. That's where that semi-moist comes from. And they're also called transparent watercolors. Now these are a lot different. They're a lot drier. They're kind of like chalky here in the pan until you wake them up with some water. And to me, these are more opaque. So they have a bit of a different look. They act a little bit different. I do like them both, and you'll see them, you know, probably right next to each other depending on what store you're at. But if you have a choice, I would go with these. These behave a little bit differently, and so my preference is for the Prang. And then if you're wanting to buy a little bit more higher grade but still semi-moist and transparent watercolors, the Winsor Newton brand is a nice upgrade, and this what I have here is actually their travel set, so that makes it nice and affordable. And it's a really nice case that it comes in. It comes with a water brush, which mine's not in here right now, and then you can see that the paints, I've had this for a while and they do last quite a while. A benefit to this is the colors do pop out once they run out and you can replace them. The little paint trays on the side, they say exactly what color it is, so it makes it really easy to reorder them. But the Prang also does that. The little ovals, they do snap out, so if you run out of a color or you I always tend to use more colors up quicker. You can buy refills for the Prang too, so that's another reason why that's nice and affordable. And you know, my students seem to go through yellow a lot, and green, and purple, like the magenta purple, so it's really easy to change out colors and replace them. Of course, you need a cup of clean water. My favorite kind of containers are the tall, like Greek or cottage cheese ones, because they're tall and they don't tip over. You also need, I think, some tape. My favorite tape is the frog tape, and this is available at most hardware stores or Walmart in the paint section. It is a painter's tape, but it does really well actually with what it says. I've tested it pretty rigorously. A nice job blocking out the paint, and a nice clean removal with hardly any tears ever. They do recommend that you keep it in the little case. That helps the edges stay clear of debris, which helps with a nice clean edge. Another good tape that you can use, this is called Pro Artist Tape, and you can look for it where you get art supplies or type it in. I think they have it on Amazon as well. This is okay. My preference is here, but if you can't find it, this is a good tape. It's a nice acid-free tape too, so if you need to do any matting, you can use this. I do have some tearing issues on the paper when removing it. I haven't tried it. A couple artist friends have recommended to me to use heat when removing tape, either from a heat gun or a hair dryer, and that helps release the adhesive. But these two are really good options. Again, my preference is here with the frog tape. Some other materials that you need are, for most of my projects, a lot of times you'll see me working with these micron pens. These are really nice because when they are wet with your watercolors, they don't bleed. So a lot of projects, more illustrative projects that I do, I'll draw them with a pencil and then I'll ink them with a micron pen and then erase my pencil marks and then paint it. And they don't bleed, they stay put really nicely. Of course, you need a pencil and a poly eraser. These are usually white. If you see them, it's a polymer eraser. So normal table salt is good to have around. And then as far as brushes, what you want to look for is a synthetic bristle. And they're usually white, sometimes they're brown. And I have a variety here. I have some flat brushes in 3 different sizes, and then I have some round brushes in some different sizes. I also have different quality levels here. So my nicest ones are these ones, and these are the Princeton, and they're the Velvet Touch series. If you want to spoil yourself, these are really, really nice. Princeton also makes a student grade brush, and let's see what they're called. If you type in like Princeton student brush set, you'll get a set and synthetic bristles. You'll find a set that has some flat brushes and some round brushes. You just need a variety of sizes. These flat brushes are good for washes or covering big spaces. They're also good for making horizontal marks. Round brushes, when you want to make textures or leaves or florals, and then of course some small brushes to make tiny little textures. And then this old clunker is just some freebie thing, but it gets the job done, so I keep it around. So again, I mostly have flat brushes and round brushes here. Again, the synthetic grade is what you want to look for on that. And you also, when you're watercoloring, you need some paper towel to help clean your brushes, but also you can use it as a tool to help control the water, both on your brush and your page. So always have some paper towels handy when you're watercoloring. These are some materials that you might see around at the art store and you're wondering if you should get them or not to start your watercolor journey. These are all really fun and I use them all quite a bit, but again, you don't need them to get started. What I have here, these are metallic watercolors, which are a lot of fun to add a little sparkle to your artwork. These are called watercolor pencils, and don't be intimidated by this expert branding that they put on here. You don't need to be an expert to try watercolor pencils. They're really fun. Of course, you can use them. You can look at this picture and just see this nice example. So they've watercolored, and then they've built up some more textures with the watercolor pencils. And what they are is they're water soluble. So when you draw with them, you have the option to make lines, or you can take a brush with water and soften it and blend it in. So they're really fun. If you pick up a set of watercolor pencils, don't be afraid to just try them. Try them on a page in your sketchbook, draw them like you would a color pencil, and then use some water on them to blend them around and see what happens. Some other fun tools are brush pens. This brand is Arteza and comes in a whole bunch of colors. These are really fun because they have paint in the pen and you can use it just like a brush, and it's preloaded with paint. You can dip it lightly in water to blend it with other colors or soften the color or make it have more watercolor properties. So really versatile and fun for getting in small spaces or just, you know, so many colors. Another tool is a mixing palette. Now you see some at the art store of all different varieties. They'll be glass or plastic. They'll look like this, kind of with different sections. This is actually not from the art store. This is from the thrift store. I think if you recognize it, I think it's a deviled egg dish. But it's glass, it does the job. So I've got all these different pools. And the nice thing about having a mixing tray is once you've got it in there and it's dried, you can always come back and reactivate it with water and reuse it, so nothing gets wasted. If you don't have one of these, don't worry though. If you notice, all your watercolor sets come with a lid that looks like this. It's divided, and it's so that you can use it as a mixing tray. So you can see this set's been really well loved, and lots of color being mixed up here. And again, it's not cleaned out because you can come back and use it. If you do need to clean it out, a tool that comes in handy is this little glass water dropper, and you could squirt water in here and wipe it out. If you don't have that, you can just get a wet brush and scrub it out and then wipe it out with a paper towel. Some other tools that I have here are masking fluid, which this is like a gel that you can draw lines with, or textures or dots, any spot that you want to prevent paint from going, and then it hardens. You can paint all around it. It kind of looks like glue, and then when it dries you can rub it off and there'll be white paper underneath it. So you can use it to leave spots that you want to leave white, or that you want to leave and make very light later. Some other tools I have is some dark black ink. I also have opaque white ink. This comes in handy a lot when you're making like stars or splatters later. And then some really fun stuff is liquid watercolors. These are really fun for really vibrant bursts of color. They look like food dye, but they're really fun to use if you want some really vibrant bursts of color. Again, optional, it's something to add to your wish list. These are all great things when someone asks you what you want for your birthday. This kind of stuff is good to boost up your art supplies. I can teach you, of course, how to use really vibrant colors just straight out of the tray, but these are something really fun to have. So with these simple tools in hand, I want to show you some of the projects that you can make. And all of these pieces were made using the tools that I've shown you in this video, and I look forward to walking you step by step through each of these projects.